Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to be looking at another classic tabletop war game that's made its way onto PC, and that's Space Hulk. So I must admit I never actually knew that this was a game up until a few years ago. Obviously the classic board game I've played, but I never realised that they produced a PC version until a few years ago. So I was 2 years old when this came out, so it was a little bit before my time. I don't remember playing it as a kid or anything. Crazy difficult. I talked about in my Shadows of the Horned Rat video how difficult that game was, but this blows it out the water for sure. There's a whole bunch of different scenarios you can play. There's one of them called Suicide Mission, and I last about 8 seconds, I think my record is, before my first Terminator is killed. So, you know, yeah. But it is a, despite how challenging it is a really good game. Especially for its time. But kind of no discredit in that comment. It's got a real great sense of kind of capturing the aesthetics, I suppose, of what a Space Hulk should feel like. It's very dark and gritty and claustrophobic, and the gene stealers move crazily fast, and trying to control your squad and ensure that they're kind of keeping all directions safe from threats is it's a real challenge. So it is a really, really fun game, and it does have some really good animations, if that, I suppose they're animations, and apparently some of them are voiced by Jervis Johnson. That's pretty cool. Thomas Pirinen told me that, so thank you, Thomas. So in this video I talk with David, Amor, and Kevin Shrapnell, who both worked at Electronic Arts, EA, who are the company that made this game. We also take a look at the sequel as well, Vengeance of the Blood Angels. I don't actually have the box for that, and I couldn't find anywhere to play it on PC or anything, so unfortunately I don't have any screen recordings of that. So all the game footage you see is from this game. So yeah, hope you enjoy. Cheers.
All right. Yeah, I'm David Amor. I've been making games. I guess I joined the games industry about 1990, and been making all sorts of games: PC, mobile, PlayStation. Currently doing blockchain games. So a wide variety of different kind of game experiences over a long period of time.
I'm Kevin Shrapnell. I started in the mid-'80s with a really small indie developers, just a few of us working together to make 8-bit games, and then built up from that. I joined at EA in '88, and I did 2 tours of duty at Electronic Arts, but I'm now COO of PlayStack, which is a UK-based indie PC console publisher. And I'm also involved with Magic Fuel Games, which is a mobile and cross-platform dev studio in the US.
How many people were working in EA Europe when you joined in '88?
Well, actually quite a lot, because I was a year after the Eagle had landed, and I remember reading that in like a Commodore, I can't remember what Commodore magazine, and it was a big article. The Eagle has landed, and it was EA had started out, and I think David and Mark had come down into their office in West Kensington and set up. But it had been quite an aggressive hiring at that point. So it was probably 60 or 70 people. There was a warehouse and quite a lot of folks in sales, retail sales, marketing, production, and everything. So it was a big enough team. It was quite surprisingly big considering it had only been a year.
Interesting. Yeah, so I suppose, I joined Electronic Arts in 1993, and so my recollection is coming there, and one of the projects that was being worked on, I thought, Kevin, that EA had shipped the PC version of Space Hulk, and maybe the Amiga version as well, but maybe your recollection is different, that first Space Hulk game.
It was about that time. So I in all honesty, don't remember the exact month that it launched, but 93 is right. And I guess we must have started in 1991, something like that. I remember the contract negotiation went on for ages, as you can imagine, with a big US corporate and Games Workshop wanting to protect their brand, and that went through a long period, and it was a multi-product deal. So that was one bit, but I don't remember when that happened. And then we settled on.
Who initiated the conversation, I suppose?
So I don't know. I wasn't directly involved. I know, I think that spent a lot of time working with John Gillard on the workshop side, but I don't recall whether that was. It could have been Joss Ellis, who ran the production team in the UK at the time. Maybe it's his idea. It could have been the marketing team. One of the ongoing challenges, and it's kind of interesting looking at the global success of Space Marine 2 right now. Back then, there wasn't a lot of retail presence in the US for Workshop. And EA is always it's a US centric organization, of course it is, and back then it was even more. The product decisions were heavily influenced by, hey, what's the lens of the US organization, and so there was a little bit of what's this Games Workshop stuff? What's this Warhammer? What's that all about? So some educational, some collaboration went on there. So I imagine it started in the UK, but I wasn't party to that, or if I was, I don't remember, which also happens.
And I remember sort of the setup at that time. The UK had a studio, and half the studio was focused on making games internally, and then there was another side, another half, I suppose, that Kevin and I were part of, that would either take pitches from companies or seen it as an opportunity. And as we're struggling to remember, but it felt like somebody presumably said at some point, hey, we could do something with Games Workshop. It's good. Yeah. It feels like a good synergy. And then the question is, okay, yeah, there's something here. Maybe we can partner with a development team that can help us build this. And yeah, I joined your team where at that time, Kevin, and I suppose we were already working with what became Key Game, a team in Somerset, led by Nick. What's Nick's surname? I've forgotten for a second.
Wilson.
Well done. Yeah. So we decided that we would make a Space Hulk game, but rather than doing internally with the programmers and artists within EA, we decided to place it with an external team in Somerset.
Yeah, that's right. And we'd worked with Nick on a couple of games, actually. Originally, he'd done some porting work for us earlier than that. Done some. There was a train Escape from Normandy or something like, I forget the name of it. I should have looked it up. But there's a train. It was kind of an interesting game. So he ported that, and then he co-developed a game called Imperium, which was a 16-bit title that we launched through EA Europe. That was a full original IP. It's developed that, and we'd had a good relationship with Nick at that point. Done a couple of games with him, and it seemed like we need a partner that we trust, who we can rely on, that will work with us, because it was going to be a partnership. We knew going into it that it would need to be a partnership. Games Workshop were not. Certainly at that time, and I think they've been through phases of how they deal with licensing, but at that time, this was the first or second kind of big licensing, video game licensing project. Yeah. I think they'd done the Space Crusade.
I remember they'd done Hero Quest and one more before that I'm aware of. Right. But I think the popularity of Space Hulk as a board game has probably kind of propelled it to the next level at this stage in the kind of licensing, Yeah,
that's right. And I think those were done with Gremlin, and I think they were literal board game translations into video games, which is fine, and that was great. But we knew that we wanted to do something that was a little bit more of a hybrid, something that captured the spirit and the essence of the game, but was a video game, like play to the strengths of both. And so we knew it wasn't going to be okay, here's the rules, go tell us when you're done kind of experience. It was going to be working closely with Workshop team, working closely with the developers, and kind of putting it all together. And we're sort of co-developing, which was fun. It was really good, and it meant that as individuals, we were much more deeply involved in all aspects of it, which was fun, because sometimes third-party games you're kind of along for the ride, whereas here we're right in the detail. But as David said, we also as a studio then started to build internal teams, and there were a couple of projects, some of which, but the two I'm thinking of didn't make it to the light of day. But they were developed by internal teams, and then there was the two Space Hulk games that did make it out.
So earlier you mentioned about kind of creating Space Hulk as a bit of a hybrid game. Can you remember, I suppose, what the changes were that you wanted to kind of make to to that experience, and how did you implement them? I suppose.
Yeah, well, I can talk more about the first one, and David can probably talk more about the second one because it was a sort of slightly different tone. But both I think were influenced by the emergence of the FPS genre and Doom and the Wolfensteins and those early
Duke Nukem
games.
Yeah.
And I think it was a tension in both games. But we, for the first one, we sort of the FPS space hadn't emerged, and we wanted to stay more in this of a strategy game or a tactical game. And so, yeah, the sort of design thinking was to say, well, okay, how can we make this help it come alive? How can this feel like you're more immersed in this, but still leave you with that tactical element of control? And I think that really my memory of the game and from a design point of view, the most interesting thing was the concept of the command time or freeze time. I forget the term we used, which is this dynamic pool of planning time that builds up but burns down. So the game is real time, but if it's real time, you never have time to think. And so you had to have time to think. And so we were just trying to find this interesting, mechanic that achieved that. I feel like it did that pretty well. And I think that it struck the right balance of keeping you tense, because even when you're paused, time's counting down. So it just keeps the pressure on. So
where did that idea come from? Do you remember?
Well, of course, I think it was my idea, but
I think it was
that may not be true. It could have been, a conversation like this where it came from a group of people and we went, "Oh, that's a good idea," and I coined it and championed it, probably. But I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. As you say, I think for me that was how you got the best of both worlds. It still felt like a game of where you were always under time pressure and you were having to think quickly, like speed chess or something like that. So you really felt the adrenaline, but ultimately it was still 90% was tactical, certainly in that first one.
I was going to say almost like the aesthetics of the game as well, like really lend itself to that. The fact you're in these kind of narrow corridors, the walls are tight, and you got these fast-moving aliens coming towards you. So it really lends itself into that. You've got time to think, but not a lot of time. So
yeah.
And I was going to say that also the fact that it's tile-based. The board game means it's perfect for a tactical shooter. I want to move this guy here and this guy here, and that seemed to fit really well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting if you look at the two games, but the 93 and the 96, the visual bar change between the two. I think that and I'm not knocking what we did in the first game because it was great and it was good at the time. But you have such the minis and the materials that come out of the base game and that Workshop were producing were very evocative and very impactful, and we captured some of that and you brought some of them to life. But I don't, it felt like we were a step bringing them to life. But I think in the second game, and then you look today, and bringing that world to life is just, that's what the video game does. Is it brings a lot of that to life.
Yeah.
But it's finding the right balance of bringing it to life and not taking away the kind of gameplay that's at the heart of it.
Yeah.
And what that first one, I'm trying to remember the platforms. It was led on PC, is my recollection, and then Amiga, ST, and then at some point PC CD. Sometime after
I think
that.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. But because there was 3DO on the second one, wasn't there as well?
Yeah. So and again, I may have some of this wrong, but it's funny how company strategy is tied up with product strategy. So if we rewind to what was probably 94, 95, then Electronic Arts had an investment in a console called 3DO. And, it was a company that sort of span out of EA, 3DO, and it was like a take on a console. And certainly when it was first being discussed, it's like an incredible spec. It's like having a very high spec computer that can do all sorts of things that you can't. It's got optical technology, it runs CDs, which were really big deal. That was pre-PlayStation, pre-Saturn. So it was a sort of exciting new system to try and build a video game for. And as Kevin says, I think the fact that my recollection is the first Space Hulk game was led by PC and Amiga, I suppose. Then really we were thinking about this as a 3DO title, first and foremost. And that because we wanted to support this, we thought it was an interesting platform. And what can we do that not only sells Space Hulk, but also sells 3DO? And when you're designing for console, obviously that's a different task than designing for a desktop PC or Amiga. So that's things down to interface. So obviously we had a controller, not a mouse and keyboard. And also, I suppose, trying to push those 3D elements that Kevin's talking about. So rather than I guess static backgrounds, as was the case with the first one, we were trying to create a more Doom-like, for want of a better expression, environment that felt like maybe it could bring in some of that crowd. Maybe that was part of the motivation. I don't remember exactly, but I think that it would have been a mistake to just try and do that fixed backgrounds as we did on the first game. I think whether it fitted the game or not, I think it would have been a bad commercial move not to try and make it. It wasn't full 3D, but 3D enough.
Yeah, I think having that it's almost like another level of immersion as well, having that kind of moving backgrounds. Like as a first time player, you kind of don't know what to expect. If you see something moving, it's going to catch your eye and that's going to draw you in. Is that an enemy going to pop out of that wall panel or something like that?
Yes.
Obviously Doom has like all of its secrets and things like that you can navigate as well. You might be looking for stuff like that. So
it was challenging because, as best I remember, the 3DO, either it wasn't out yet when we were building it or it had just come out. So whenever, Kevin will know, whenever you're trying to work on a pre-release system, then the dev kits don't work properly. You don't really know what spec you're working to. You don't really know whether you can do a 3D environment. So it's a tough thing to build for. A lot of things felt fresh and new and difficult to work out. So I think that we had a really good foundation from the first game because evidently that worked and people enjoyed it. But figuring out how to make that a console experience on the next generation of hardware before it was out probably was non-trivial.
Yeah, sure. That was going to be one of my questions. Was I gather then the first game was a commercial success and both parties saw an opportunity for game number 2. Do you remember really any of those conversations? Like, what did anyone want to do things differently? Was it really the same game but a bit of an upgrade, a bit of a tidy up?
No, I don't think it was ever the intent to be the same game. I think you've got, exactly as David's talking about, you've got a hardware generation change that's sort of happening in there, and you've got a genre change going on with the impact of FPS games. And I think both of those were pushing to raise the fidelity on the way the game looks and the kind of freedom of control. But it's then, I imagine the tussle was and I was involved in some of the early pre-pro, but kind of then left the company, so I don't remember. I don't remember. I wasn't involved. But there's that tussle between the essence of the game and delivering on things that marketing teams are generally they're looking for things to work with. How do we stand out? How are we remarkable? What can this game go? How does it stand up against the competition? And so there's been a tension there. So yeah, I think it was a commercial success. I don't know any of the numbers now, but certainly enough to continue.
There was a shift in EA that stuck both at EA and every other company, I think, where, and it, like Kevin, I can't remember the numbers, but let's say Space Hulk, we spent $1 million making it, and it made $2 million. It made $1 million profit. Great, we just made $1 million profit. I think that was every publisher's model. Does it make a profit? Great, then we should do it. And I think at some point in time, certainly at EA, I remember this push more toward blockbusters, where a couple of years later, when I was at EA, we got the Harry Potter license, and now Space Hulk goes up against Harry Potter, and regardless of how good the games are, to some extent, Harry Potter is going to be a bigger title. So I agree with Kevin that it was a commercial success. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done the sequel. I think it would be looked at through a different lens now.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and that's partly the publishing entity evolving as well as the market and transition. So it's part of the interest in the fun of being in the industry. Nothing stays static for very long.
That's right. The one thing that I remember was, and I think this was the PC CD version. So there was an idea. Probably we did some deals with people that sell CD drives. I can't remember, but we felt it was a good idea at EA to have a PC CD version of Space Hulk, and then there's a question of, what should we do now that we're not on floppy disks anymore? We should enhance it in some way. And the thought was, we can have voices now in the game. Great, we can have those Space Marines come alive and various other things. But knowing that it wasn't good, there was a budget there, and I remember trying to get budget for a voice actor and that being turned down, which I'm guessing would be £10,000 or something. So not a huge sum of money, but it shows that we were being quite careful with our budget. And as a result, I ended up recording a lot of those Space Marine voices myself. And I don't know if you can hear on this call, but I don't sound like a gravelly Space Marine. So so I did my best, and now they die, etc. And then pitched it down on a keyboard that we had in the office. And I remember PC Zone's review, you can see that it stuck with me for 30 years, said, it sounds like the producer maybe asked his neighbors to do the voice recording. Well, they were half right. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, maybe that's a good segue into thinking about how we partnered with the workshop studio team, because I'm pretty sure on the first one, there's a good number of the voices were done by folks within the studio on the Games Workshop side, and there was we had a really good relationship, and it was, I can't remember, I'll say every month I was up in Nottingham for a couple of years, meeting folks, seeing what's going on, kind of getting immersed in that and demoing our progress, because it was kind of pushing away from that, well, it's a clone of the board game, into it's a new experience. And so it was a much more kind of collaborative process. And I got to know Andy Jones, who was a kind of our primary partner, contact on the side. He was very creative. He is very creative and was very creative on the project. And so it was a good, good collaborative experience. And he was kind of feed us into all of the different folks who had views, opinions, stuff to share. And it's just, those trips were great. A lot of good material came away, and a lot of kind of good immersion happened. So there was some fun, and it was, for me, visiting that studio, coming from a cubicle-based Slough office, which somebody pointed out the other day. They filmed The Office, the UK office, in Slough, or that was all set in Slough, and we were in Langley. So you could split hairs and say it's not really Slough, but guess what? It's really Slough. And then to go to Nottingham and go to this office where there's just guys sculpting models, painting models, testing board games, and then you've got the whole at the time, and I haven't been up there for a long time, but they had like a museum, like an archive. You could walk around.
It's massive now. It's bloody huge.
I imagine. Yeah. But that was fun, and I know we took other folks from within the EA group to kind of go and see that, so they can kind of go, look, you may not know that much about this world, but look.
And it's a world, as you say, it is a world, and there's so much to explore within it. So, and it's funny, like you saying this, like from conversations I've had with other people doing these kind of calls, they've all pretty much said the same thing, that they were invited to go to Warhammer World in Nottingham, experience the world, get introduced to the models, the sculptors, the painters, and what it is they're trying to convey as a narrative, I suppose. And
really, really good. And there's a lot of third-party things going on as well at the time. I know there were a lot of special effects people, a lot of there's always live action conversations going on, I imagine, in their world. And maybe some of them are coming to fruition, but back then there was some early stuff, and then I think some of the music came from a pseudo death metal band that used Warhammer and then 40k as their vibe, and so that sort of stuff was that's all just real icing on the cake when you're building a game like this. So really nice.
A question for Kevin, I suppose, whether you mentioned that probably that version of Space Hulk in '93 was the first departure from a facsimile of a board game. So, and in my experience, IP holders are a little sensitive about divergences. And now you've got two games companies, albeit in different mediums. Was that hard to navigate, or did you just act as unison?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's a really good question, and it wasn't as difficult or painful as it might have been, and I think that's partly down to the studio team's real enthusiasm and passion for the world, and they, at least in all the dealings I had, there was a real enthusiasm for enhancing, exploring the world in a different medium, if you like, a different form. And so there was a real, positive about that. And of course, there were checks and balances. No, Space Marines don't wear tutus. You can't do that. I know it sounds fun, but no, you can't come back here. There's some boundaries that you had to work within, but it was really collaborative, and I think that was the key. It was that there was a lot of time spent getting to know each other and getting to know the franchises. So, yeah.
Do you think that it was an important piece of business for Games Workshop? I don't have a sense of that. I heard an interview with Tony Hawk, who said that he made a lot more money and got a lot more exposure from being in a PlayStation game than he did doing a 900 or whatever. So.
Right, and it's sort of like that's a bit of a who made the most money out of Baldur's Gate kind of conversation, or right. Space Marine 2 conversation. Like, in all honesty, I suspect it was an incremental piece of licensing business for them at the time, and the licensing business has been very fruitful for them over the years, but I don't think it was changing their core business. At the heart of it, and the phrase, and even today, it strikes me as strange, is the phrase that said, "We're a toy soldier company." And it's like, that's, the whole business is geared around selling lead, selling plastic or pewter or whatever. It's all about, it's the razor business. You're selling there. And I remember, I think the CEO's name was Tom Kirby, I think. Is that right? I remember having lunch with him, and I don't remember much apart from the one message which he said was like, look, and I was really aware of. I ran a hobby game shop in the early '80s, and so I sold Games Workshop products as a retailer, but this is retail exclusive. This was as a third party, and so I was really aware of Games Workshop. But his message was, teenage boys find their way into Games Workshop at some point in their early teenage years, probably, and they disappear into that universe for a couple of years of real passionate enthusiasm for the hobby, and then a lot of them get, quote, girlfriends or something else and stop and disappear out. So but then there's a core that carry on. Now, I don't know in all honesty, I think that's a slightly simplistic and 1990s view of things, and it's probably not quite how it is today. And there's always been this real core veteran group, but I do think you get a lot of people pass through the hobby, like a lot of things people do it, and that was really interesting and eye-opening to think about. How are they moving things along? But that sort of speaks to the kind of, well, you can recycle because you've got new audience coming through on other times. I feel like I've drifted off topic of the question. Sorry.
It's all right. It's fine. I wonder as well, kind of going back to the whether it was a success or vital for Games Workshop. Like I was 2 years old when this game came out, so my kind of perception, I suppose, of PC gaming at the time might be a little off. But I wonder, PC gaming obviously wasn't quite as accessible back then as it was nowadays. But I think there was almost perhaps a geek culture of, nowadays everyone, you got Steam Decks and all sorts. You can play all these games on your couch. Whereas back then, I think it was much more of a specialist requirement, if that's the kind of right phrase, to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, I suspect.
I was going to say the games industry itself was small. Well, relatively small. So
Oh yeah, by today's standards.
yeah,
for
by
sure.
today's standards, yeah.
Yeah,
And
it's
I
funny.
think,
Sorry, go on, Kevin.
it's almost, sorry, yeah, to go back to David's original question about how important was Space Hulk to Games Workshop, the video game version. I think that for both EA and for Games Workshop, Lord of the Rings came along whenever that was in the
2000,
early
2001,
yeah, and that just changed. It was just, and because that was also timed with the Mega Drive, or was it not? Was it the next generation? See, this is the problem.
PlayStation 2, wasn't it? Yeah, I think they did the video games. Yeah,
that's right. And so EA had a huge success with the Lord of the Rings license. It changed. I'm pretty sure it changed Games Workshop's business for a period of time, and they had a pre, during, and I think they'll have had a post era from that, and that will have changed their perspective on video games as well. I assume. I haven't talked to the guys. I stay in touch with Andy Jones, but besides that, I haven't really talked to anybody there for what seems like decades, and probably is.
Yeah. So we did that. I'm just trying to think of the chronology, maybe tie it up. So we said the version that you started there was on PC, and then Amiga, and then ST, and then PC-CD, 3DO. I said it did a PC multiplayer, so we did have a LAN version. I guess that wasn't present on the original PC version. There was no multiplayer. And that was something that was relatively new, the ability to play over LAN. There wasn't the concept of playing over the internet at that point. Or was there? Maybe
the very earliest iteration.
Very, very early.
Yeah.
Pretty sure that wasn't possible. I think it was just for LAN play. So, but that was something new. I mean, obviously, because it's a sort of squad base, it's quite suitable for multiplayer. And then also a PlayStation and a Saturn version, which I don't think we did a great job of, if I'm honest. And I think often you are up against time and budget, and whether the platform is suitable or not. Whether the Saturn was a good system to run Space Hulk or not, doesn't matter. Let's get it out there. That's another, So, that was going on a little bit, I think, toward the end. But that felt like all the SKUs. Am I missing any out from those early Space Hulk games? I think that's probably it. We wouldn't have done a Mac version though. No, wouldn't have.
No, and we didn't do 8-bit, so we didn't go backwards. And because that is still of the era when you were bridging from 8 to 16-bit and beyond. And I don't think we did. We certainly didn't do NES or anything like that off of the original.
Yeah, so we did. PlayStation and Saturn. I remember. So just sort of early on those platforms.
Yeah. There's another thing that happened during, I can quite clearly remember putting, obviously we're in the era of big CRT monitors and not nice flat screens and things like that. I remember loading up, David, I don't know if you were on this trip or you did the similar trips, but I think we went to a Games Day. I can't remember, there used to be Games Day and then something else that was alternating in the name. So I might have got the name wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was the NEC Birmingham event, and it was, we took an early version of Space Hulk, and we took a bunch of computers with the biggest CRT monitors we could rent. We threw them in the back, probably quite literally threw them in the back of a white van, and drove up the M40 to the NEC to present. And that was quite an experience. I mean, I've done trade shows and interviews and things before, but the players, that are attending Games Day are getting bussed in from shops and all around the country, and they're so passionate, enthusiastic about it. And the thing that floored me at the time, and I still look at it, what was, we asked to sign brochures, we had to sign things, and it's like, well, you don't know who I am or what I'm doing, and you've okay, sure. And after that, that sort of oddity of it, the humbleness of, well, no, you don't really want me. I was like, okay, sure, just signing these brochures because that's what everyone else was doing, and it's like, well, okay, sure. But it was fun. It was fun to get feedbacks, to sit down and listen to players playing, and even today, I love watching and listening to players play our games, and you kind of learn so much from doing it. And so it's super useful to do that. I mean, it's not an ideal playtest environment, but it was fun.
I remember did a few of those myself on both those games. And of course, the thing is, despite the fact I work on that game every day for a year or so, they still know way more than I'll ever know. Like questions about, well, the Gene Stealers in Generation 3, like, I'm sorry, I don't know. And I felt like I should have the answers, but I was being completely outclassed by the people attending Games Day.
Yeah, lovely. I think we can wrap it up there. If there's any closing statements either of you want to make.
Well, from my perspective, I look back over. I've shipped a lot of games over the years, and some of them I'm super proud of. Some of them I'm like, yeah, okay. At the time, I may have been more enthusiastic, but Space Hulk is one of the games I look back on fondly. I've got. I look at the screenshots today and I think, okay, but at the time I remember being pleased with it. I'm very proud of having worked on it, and it was a project that the reviews gets knocks in a few places, but I look back and think, no, I'm really pleased to have done that. That was a really good experience, and that's not true of every game. So yeah,
exactly the same. I think both are solid titles, and had a lot of people have fun with them. A mistake I made, this is sort of junior producer mistake, is I made the second one way too hard. What will happen is you get so used to playing it every day, and the testers get used to playing it every day. I go, oh, it's a bit easy, level 3. So you go, oh, yeah, we'll whack it up. I go, well, that's better. And I really regret that I just made it too hard for everybody, which, yeah. There we go. If I was to have my time again, I'd maybe turn that dial back down again. But older and wiser,